All right, everybody, welcome back to Cool's Interviews. Today is quite a fascinating topic, mainly how I found it, Jason's experience, and how Jason has used this to really change how he looks at life. Jason is going to be our guest. He wrote this book, 8 Days Till Sunrise, and this is a book and really topic I found because I walked into a Barnes and Noble one day, kind of out of the blue, decided to go there, and he was there. So, Jason, thank you for joining us. And for anyone that perhaps doesn't know you, just quick little bio to tell them about yourself.
Sure. First, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Um, so my name is Jason Dennen. I've been living in Colorado for about 22 years, originally from New Jersey. Moved west to kind of experience something new that I had never experienced, rock climbing, outdoors, things that kind of New Jersey just didn't have. And so I quit my job, moved out here, and never looked back. So whether it's skydiving, triathlon, um, you know, ice climbing, climbing mountains. I was always looking for some sort of challenge to try to fulfill the need to I guess not ever stop moving my feet.
Hey, and Colorado's really good for that. I mean, I haven't done skydiving, but I can say I at least have done mountains, and me and Sam have done a lot of the fight for air climbs and stuff like that. So, yeah, we hear you. It's a great state, and I guess before we get into it, what is skydiving like? Because I have a fear of heights, so I don't think I will ever experience it myself.
You're assuming I don't have a fear of heights. Once you're at the door, it doesn't matter. Once you fall out, there's no going back in. So, you see the ground for 2.5 miles above, and cars look really small, and they start getting a little bit bigger as you go, and then it's time to pull the parachute. As far as how it feels, I think it feels different depending on where you are in your journey. I think at first it's terrifying. I remember the first time I jumped out, I was my hands was shook for 6 or 7 hours afterwards. I was like, "What is this? This feeling was great for a couple minutes, but now, I want it to go away." And then as you get more and more comfortable with more and more jumps, sort of the adrenaline goes down a bit, and I mean, it's still there certainly, and after a day of jumping 4 or 5 times, you're certainly kind of exhausted, even though it's not like you're running, because that adrenaline goes down and out of your body, and you starts to return to normal. um, so it's a challenge as it goes forward. At first it's terrifying. It's, can you control yourself? Can you pull the parachute? Can you keep everything together to land mentally? And as it goes, it's more of you're developing skills. Maybe you're wingsuiting and flying your body, or you're in different positions with your body to link up with other people that you're skydiving with at the same time to build formations or do different movements. So it's an ever a changing experience. It just depends where you are. Along the line of learning to skydive, you're always learning. You're always trying to work on those little skills, and there's such a finite time to either do it or not do it, because you're in the free fall for about a minute at a time. And so it's like, minutes over, that's it. You don't get to work on those skills anymore until the next time. So it's I mean, there's the wind tunnel and things like that you can practice your skills, but the wind tunnel, in my opinion, it's good for working on skills, but it's a completely different experience because you don't have to worry about actually pulling your parachute and malfunctioning parachute and outside conditions and things like that. So I always, love jumping out of the plane. That there's the wind tunnel doesn't replace that feeling. So you learn a lot about yourself, really, during the whole process. And it started to me as a challenge of, can I really do this, or do I think I can do this, or thinking you could do something and actually doing it are two different things. So I guess I just wanted to prove myself I could do it.
Right. Well, that's a good mindset. We definitely see that later in your book, obviously, when you get to the recovering part. Now, I know on the day of the accident, you had said it was your third jump. Like, how many times did you usually jump a day? Did it just depend on like weather, or what kind of went into that?
Yeah, it is heavily weather dependent. But 4 or 5 times, between 3 and 5 typically. If the weather was nice, 5. So I think a lot of people that don't skydive think you just go there and you just jump once and that's it. They're like, no, it's like a full day event, where you just, you get down, pack your parachute, get up again as quickly as you can and jump again. So it gets a little bit addictive, I'll say, but it's an amazing experience and certainly worth it. But so yeah, that day was the third one. I couldn't go for number 4 after the accident on the third one.
Yeah, which is obviously very understandable. Like we'll get to that here in a bit. You kind of said you had you talked about like rock climbing and triathlons. Do you want to talk about a little bit of that background too before the accident?
Sure. So triathlon started after I got out of college. I was looking for something to do. I was like, I can't just sit on the couch and watch TV. And so I was sitting there one day, actually watching TV. And so NBC comes on every November. They have the Ironman World Triathlon Championship out of Hawaii in Kona. And so I'm sitting there watching. I was like, man, I wonder if I could do that. And I wasn't a long distance runner or a competitive swimmer. I knew how to swim, but not the right way. And I hadn't biked since I had a BMX bike. And so I looked at it, I was like, maybe let me try. So first I started running, and then I was like, well, if I could run a marathon, then I'll invest in a bike and everything else that's going along with it. So ran a marathon and kind of went from there, started signing up for triathlons, figuring out to swim the right way. Back then there weren't too many coaches. You just kind of had to figure it out yourself by reading a book and figuring out how to swim correctly and bike and all that. So that started off after college, and then I took a break when I moved out to Colorado, and I started reading books. A friend of mine actually hiked the whole Appalachian Trail, and she got me into thin air. She goes, "Oh, you need to read Into Thin Air, the John Krakauer book about 1996 Everest disaster." Why you would think it's a good idea to climb after reading that book is beyond me, but for some reason that sparked something in me. I started reading other books and more. So I mean, New Jersey doesn't have any or very little climbing, so I just started reading books. I was just like, yeah, it sounds like something that'd be super challenging. So at the same time, I decided to move to Colorado, and I live in Boulder, and Boulder was like the triathlon mecca. All the pros would come and train, and where I was in New Jersey, I'd go for a 6-hour ride on my bike and see like one other person on the bike the entire day. Here, you leave your driveway and you see 3 people go by before you even get out of the driveway. So I was like, man, I need to move somewhere where there's people that do things similar to me, or so that's how I kind of found Boulder, Colorado, from triathlon magazines. And then I realized after I'm reading all these books and I'm about to move out to Boulder in a couple months, I was like, wow, wait a minute. It has some of the best rock climbing in the world just right outside of town. I was like, lucky for me. I guess I'm going to start climbing. So in the move out to Colorado, I went out to Washington. They have a lot of training out there because there's glaciers and things like that. So went on a 2-week course, learned how to rock climb, learned how to travel through glaciers and ice and things like that. I mean, as much as you can learn in 2 weeks, I suppose, at least as a starting spot. So I moved out to Colorado, stopped doing triathlon, started doing climbing, and kind of, learned the ropes, got my butt kicked a whole lot of times. Where they say you only get good judgment by living through bad judgment. And I lived through a lot of bad judgment, learning how to climb. And yeah, went down that road, went back to triathlon after that for a bunch of years, and then discovered skydiving because I was out riding my bike and I went past the airport. I see people in the air with the parachutes, and I'm like, huh, let's go try that. So there's always something to try out here.
Right. Yeah, I started well, I guess rock climbing, but mountain climbing when I was probably in my like maybe 10 or 11. Started with Sherman and Bearstadt. So not too
All right.
difficult, but some 14ers. And yeah, in your book, when you get to the picture section, you actually show yourself with a one of the oh, what are they called? The replacement parachutes, the safety ones. So
Oh,
your
yeah,
first one
the
had
reserve,
failed.
yeah.
Yeah, so what happened there?
So I was so the first time I had a cut, what they call it, a cutaway. You don't actually cut anything. Back in the old days, I guess you actually cut something up, but not with modern gear. But I was learning to wingsuit. So at this point, I had, I don't know, a little over 200 skydives under my belt. and there's a training class for wingsuits, just because there's certain things about a wingsuit that make opening the parachute a little more difficult or problematic, where the parachute can get stuck in what they call a burble, where it doesn't fully deploy, and you have to figure out how to fix that. So there's some dangers that aren't the same as just falling straight down to earth. So third jump of the day on learning how to wingsuit. I finish the wingsuit. I'm flying along, pull the pilot chute. My parachute deploys, and all of a sudden it gets really tight around my neck. So the whole thing gets pulled up, and almost to the point it's starting to choke me out. And I'm going into a really tight spin towards the ground. So it's like the G forces are super high, and so it's always an interesting thing the first time you ever have to cut away from your parachute, because that's another thing you practice on all these what they call emergency procedures, where there's one handle on one side of your chest where that releases the parachute when you pull it up, and then you pull out the second one and that releases your reserve parachute. So you're always touching them, whether you say before you actually jump out of the plane, just to remind yourself in your head, so it's not something you have to think about to fix. It's you automatically do it when something goes wrong. So the parachute deploys. It's around my neck. I'm swinging these tight G forces, and I'm just like, oh man, something's not good. So I quickly look up and I see the parachute's just a mess above me in line twists, and there's no way I was going to fix it. So you only have a couple seconds to figure out, like, am I cutting away? What am I doing? So it was just like, so I pulled the first emergency handle, and it pulled away the parachute, and the second one brought open the reserve. I think it was in 2 or 3 line twists in the reserve. So it means I was spinning when the reserve went out, because I was spinning from the original parachute. So it's not like I could have just stopped spinning, because I was in a terminal spin that there's no way I could have fixed. So I'm already spinning in the second one, which means when your parachute goes up and you're spinning, well, the lines spin. So it's open. Luckily, it's the top of the parachute is open, the reserve, but I'm just like, I need to fix these line twists, and you have to unspin yourself, I guess is the way to say it. You kick out of it, or you have to use your momentum to get that twist out. So I get out of those 3 twists, and I'm still looking. I'm like, okay, where am I going to, land anywhere near the airport and or the runway? Because I'm pretty far out. And luckily, I was able to still guide. I had enough altitude to still guide myself to the grass where the landing strip is. Because when you first learn to do wingsuit diving or just regular skydiving, you pull much higher than you would as you get more experience, because you build in an extra safety factor if something screws up, like what happened on that third jump. And pulling the reserve gave me enough altitude to fix it, because you can't undo altitude. Once you're at a certain altitude, you can't go back up. It's like ground's coming. So it gave me a little more time to pull the reserve. So that's an interesting experience when you pull the reserve. You definitely get adrenaline going. You get a weird, or at least for me, I got a weird smile on my face, like you got away with something. I don't know if that's the right feeling, or you just have the adrenaline flowing, and you're just like, oh, that just happened. That was the first time I had to cut away. So I was like, in some ways there's pride too, because you're just like, well, I was in the pressure pack situation. I still followed through with those safety procedures and saved my own life. So, I mean, I guess there's some pride in that.
Right, taking pride that even when it got tough, you stayed calm and were able to follow what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Now that you have after skydiving, going through some of those situations, it's almost, you have an odd experience of not getting excited about too many things in life. Where I had a bear. I was out hiking and there was a bear. This was about a year and a half ago, and I'm just walking across El Dorado Canyon in outside of Boulder. And all of a sudden, this bear comes down this trail, and it wasn't like a massive grizzly, but it was probably 5 feet tall, and it's super wide and way stronger than I am. So if it attacked me, I wouldn't have had a chance. But it kind of just went 50 feet in front of me, stood up, and kind of stared me down. And I just stared at it, and I was like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen. Hopefully, it doesn't charge me, but I don't think I can outrun it. And so it kind of then ran downhill and didn't do anything. And the next hikers came up to me, and I was like, oh, watch out! There's a bear that just crossed the path. And they're just like, aren't you freaking out? Aren't you excited. And I was just like, I thought about that a couple minutes later. I was like, maybe I should be, but I think my adrenaline is all whacked out that after a couple things I've been through that I didn't get excited at all in some weird way. I'm not sure that's a good thing, but I was just like, no, my heart rate's the same as it was just walking down the trail. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's something I think we've heard too when we watched that documentary Free Solo about
Hmm.
Alex Honnold who free climbed Capitan,
Hmm.
where he just like something it doesn't kick anymore because he's done so many things like 3,000 feet up in the air, and he's just like, it's not too bad anymore. And so I guess maybe it's something you condition yourself to as well. You're like, I've done that, it's not too bad.
Or you broke something and you can't
Yeah.
fix it. I guess I don't know.
Hey, I mean, it might help you also do some stuff that you might not ever do before as well. So,
That's true.
well, another thing that was kind of important in your book was like your 9 to 5 and your mentality there. So, what was that like before the accident?
Yeah. So a few years before the accident, I get a promotion, and little did they didn't really tell me that it was going to be turned into 12 to 14 hours a day, and working 6 days a week, and it was a ton and more than I was expecting, and probably more than I wanted, or I definitely more than I wanted. So you kind of feel like your hard work paid off, and but then you're just like, oh man, this isn't exactly what I wanted. It's kind of taken over my life, and I was super stressed all the time. Probably not super pleasant to be around. I didn't like myself all the time, um, and I would just like, I wouldn't be able to sleep full nights. I would be staring at the ceiling, going, "I have too much to do the next day. How am I going to get all this done?" And you don't want to let yourself down. You want to let the people down that hired you and gave you a promotion. And so I was super on edge, and I wasn't happy. And that's kind of how I got into skydiving, um, because what I found over the years, I guess I didn't know this till just a couple years ago. It seemed like everything I would pick to do as a hobby was something where you're completely in the moment, where it doesn't matter about future, doesn't matter past. It's like you're in it right now. And unknowingly, I picked skydiving. That one day I was, riding my bike. I was like, man, I'm miserable. I need something to get my mind away from all this stress, because it just too much is taken over my life. And oddly enough, I guess skydiving could be super stressful in the beginning because it was, but eventually it becomes calming. And when you're at the airport, I always said when I was at the airport, nothing else existed in the world except the airport and jumping, which was super beautiful because it took me away from that really stressful situation. And it gave me a sense of happiness from the time I was there, to take my mind away from other things and challenge myself. And one of the things that sort of similar to that bear, where when you're skydiving at first, the first bunch of jumps, your heart rate is pinned, and it's going really hard. But as you get more and more into it, what you realize is when you or what happens to your body is you jump out of the plane and actually you get more calm and your heart rate goes down, um, while you're jumping. Now, if something like the pulling the reserve happens, then certainly you spike back up. But if everything's going all right, you're sort of in a calmer state than you certainly were when you first started skydiving. So it's kind of an amazing feeling.
Yeah, I still don't know.
Hey, hardest part is signing up. Just call up, give them your credit card. Once you jump on the plane, you're not getting back out until you jump out the door. So I would
Right, there's
encourage you to
one
do
way
it.
up. Well, Sam, before we go any further, do you have any questions to kind of just start off?
I guess we could do this one that's not pertaining to afterwards, but have you wanted to skydive again since the incident or no?
Yes, I've had the feeling to want to skydive, because even I was rehabbing, after the accident, and on certain trails that I would walk on, easy trails, I know what the plane sounds like, the jump plane. So you would hear it going overhead, doing their circle to get to altitude, and you would kind of get a little bit excited. And but after the accident, before I was able to walk or do anything, my mom was just like, can you please not jump out of this? She knew how my screwy brain works. She's like, can you please not jump out of the plane again? And I felt tremendous guilt, going through that accident, putting them through it. And there's other things to do. And I said, okay, I won't. Because they were already nervous every weekend I would go and skydive. But I can't imagine what we'll talk about with the accident, putting them through it every weekend if they were knowing, where is he today, and is he jumping out of the plane, and we saw what just happened a few months ago. So I was like, we got other things to do. So, I mean, yeah, I kind of gave it up.
That's completely understandable.
Yeah, totally fair. I guess let's get to the accident of the day. What was it like? Obviously before, because you did two jumps.
Uh-huh.
Do you want to kind of just set the stage how everything was going before the accident?
Yeah, just a normal day. I mean, got up, went for a trail run, headed to the airport, and the first two jumps, went off as normal. Nothing super memorable about it. I mean, thinking back now, I had a look in because you take a log of all your jumps and you write it down after you do that, or most people log them for a variety of reasons. But months later, I had to look back because I didn't remember that I jumped two times before the accident that day. But so they were unremarkable jumps, just normal stuff, nothing out of the ordinary. It was a nice day, sunny as I remember it. It was June 23rd, so one of the longest days of the year. It might have been, I don't know if it was the 21st or 22nd, the longest day of the year, but this was the 23rd, so it was close to the longest day of the year as far as sunlight being out. So yeah, first jumps went fine. Went up, packed my parachute, went up for the third jump that day, and everything was normal. Pulled my parachute. I was under the parachute going in for a landing, 150 feet off the ground, and then a huge wind gust comes off the mountains. Anyone not from Colorado, the wind out here is can be interesting, unexpected, could be super gusty. It's all over the place. And that's one of the interesting things, I guess, the skydiving in Colorado as well, because you have to deal with a lot of different weather conditions. So 150 feet off the ground, huge wind hits me. So it's like because what you want to do when you're skydiving is you want to land into the wind if you can. So typically you're talking about less than 15-mile-an-hour winds. 15-mile-an-hour winds, you probably go straight down. Usually this day it was probably 4 or 5 miles an hour into the wind. So in that, your parachute is going typically without any headwind, about 20, or mine was 25 miles an hour straight ahead. So you're into that, let's say 4 or 5 miles an hour, you fly into it, and it gives you a nicer, softer landing because it slows you down a bit. So I'm doing that and, flying forward, and that wind hits me from behind, and all of a sudden I'm like shaken up, almost like picked up in the harness, which is I never felt before, and jostled, and you're like, it was incredible, like kind of gust that hit me, or surge. And so I kind of get my wits about me again, and I'm just like, that was hard. And so 150 feet off the ground, it's about 5 seconds before you land. So in front of me is a fence and an airplane hangar. So before that wind gust, there's no question I was going to land on the grass like I had done hundreds and hundreds of times before. So I get hit by this wind, and it starts gusting me really much faster forward. So I was just like, well, I don't know. I have 5 seconds to land. And the thing about being that low to the ground, you can't turn, because the way a parachute turns is you have two handles. If you pull on one, it collapses the outside of the parachute, and it creates your parachute dives towards the ground. Now, if you're way above the ground, that's the intended purpose. And if you lose 200 feet of altitude, well, that's fine, and that creates the turn, and then you level off, and then you start going straight again. But when you're 150 feet, if you do that same maneuver, you'll go directly into the ground because your parachute won't have enough altitude to recover, and you're going to hit the ground at probably highway speeds. And if you hit the ground going, 40, 50 miles an hour, you're not going to live, or it's pretty unlikely. So when it hits me, I just go, okay, I can't turn away from this because I'm going to go right into the ground. So I'm just like, well, I hope I land in time before this fence. So you're counting down the seconds, and you get down to like 2 seconds, and I'm going really fast, much faster than normal because of that wind surge. Like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to land in front of this fence. And then with 1 second to go, I'm like, there's no way. I'm carrying way too much speed, and it kind of, as I'm about to touch down the ground, I hit the fence, and it was a wire, almost like a cattle fence. So it's 3 wires. So 1 wire comes across my chest, 1 across my stomach, and I'm going so fast. As soon as it goes tight, it just breaks. I'm not sure if it, is exactly broke at the time. I don't know if it snapped or broke the poles that it was in, but it didn't slow me down pretty much at all. And then 10 feet behind is the airplane hangar, which is just, a metal building. And I hit right into the side of that, and I black out when I hit it. And I thought when I hit it, I said, I'm okay. Turns out that's not exactly, or maybe I did say that, but what happened was I was laying on the ground. First folks that came up to me, and I'm blacked out. So they told me this happened months later. They start talking to me, and the first thing I say to them is, "Don't call anyone. Give me a second. I'll be okay." And it's an odd thing to say, but I what I truly think is I went into fight or flight mode, and my body knew something was terribly wrong, and it chose to fight. And that it's almost like when you fall down, if you get up really fast, you're like, oh, I'll be okay, But I think that mentality is what I had, was to get up, and there's no way I was getting up with all those injuries. But I think it was my body kicking into default mode of going, okay, now it's time to survive. So that was shortly after the accident. Luckily they called 911. They didn't listen to a thing I said, which I'm thankful that they didn't do that. They saw my broken body laying on that ground. It was like, this is something's really bad. And so luckily the fire chief was just like a mile or two down the road, just happened to be in his truck. So he was on the scene within, 4 or 5 minutes.
Yeah, and you were going fast enough that you left a dent in the building. You showed it in your book, and it's pretty crazy.
I did. I eventually went back and visited the dent. I think part of the recovery was really going back and confronting, what happened, and one was most importantly thanking all the people at the skydiving school, for all that they did. Not only the first responders that came by, but also they brought my car down to my family, because my family's from the East Coast and still lived out there. When they flew out here, they brought my car down to them right away, so they'd have my car when I was in the coma. So first was thank you, and then I was like, okay, now it's time to walk over across to that field to see where it happened. And I saw the dent in the building. And actually, I got a call probably 8 or 9 months later. I was at my office. I was finally, at this point, I was recovered. And I get this is before you didn't answer your cell phone, because all those insurance companies will call you trying to get you to buy whatever, your car repair. So you still answered your phone. So I answer it, a weird number. And so they said it was some insurance company from, Northeast Kansas or something. I was just like, well, I don't have insurance through them, I don't think. So they're like, are you the guy who hit Hangar 112 at the Vance Brand Airport? I was like, yes, that was me. And so they asked me, they record it and asked me to explain the whole thing. And I said, well, do I owe money? And for that dent in the building, and apparently the person who owned the airplane hangar waited until they knew I was okay to report the damage. And apparently that was the insurance company they had as through my skydiving license, that I was unaware of, who eventually, I guess, paid for the dent. I wish they would have given me the metal piece out of there, and so I could hang it on my wall or something like that, but they didn't give it to me. But I didn't have to pay anything for it. The insurance covered, I guess, my dents in bodies, creating dents in sides of buildings. So yeah.
Oh, well, that was nice of them, at least not to have to make you do it.
That 150
Considering
bucks a year covered that dent, I guess, that I paid in premium.
Well, then that takes us to obviously you get taken to the hospital and you go into medically induced coma
Yeah.
because your injuries are severe, and we'll let you talk about that. But much like when I read another book called Bridging the Tragedy, which was about the Silver Bridge collapse, where I had one scene that stuck with me. The scene that stuck with me reading your book was your dreams during coma. Like, they're pretty haunting. So,
Yes.
first, if you want to talk about the injuries, and then obviously the fight you had to do while you were in a coma.
Sure. So, so after the accident, they call 911. Luckily, there's a community hospital about 2 or 3 miles away from skydiving school and airport. So they got me there really quick. I guess they assessed my injuries. I was blacked out, so I had no idea what was going on. They called for the Flight for Life helicopter to bring me to a level 1 trauma center that kind of takes care of the worst type of accidents. So it's about 50 miles away. I do remember hearing rotor blades for a short second, and I don't know if they put me out or I just went out or what it was, but I did know I was on a helicopter. And so they get me to the hospital, go into immediate life-saving surgery. So the big injury, or the most severe, was when I hit on my left side, and I break 10 of my 12 ribs, and that impacts my heart so hard that my heart shoots out of where it normally sits, called the pericardial sac, and ends up on the right side of my chest. So the doctors later tell my family after they do the surgery, like, we've never done the surgery on anyone before because no one ever makes it alive. That's pretty much in a blunt force trauma situation like that, you're dead on spot. They're like, we can't believe he made it off the field or in the helicopter to come to see us. And one of the things they said, they're like, we don't get to treat people with this many injuries normally, just because people die when they have that many injuries. So yeah, they intubated me in the coma. So besides the heart, it was about 20 broken bones, 4 total organs they had to fix. So I was kind of a mess. My body just broke up on impact when it hit the building, because immovable object. Besides, well, I guess I moved it a little bit with a dent, but for the most part, it didn't move. So then so I'm in the coma, and it was so nightmare after nightmare after nightmare. We're talking hundreds of nightmares. And the weird thing about being in a coma is, if you, in normal situations, you have a nightmare, you just wake up and say, well, it was some nightmare. You shake it off and you go on living life. But when you're in a coma, you can't wake up. So it almost becomes your reality, what's going on in that coma, some altered state of what's going on. So most of the nightmares kind of have a similar theme, in that I'm in horrible shape. People are with me, but they're refusing to help me. And I mean, for instance, one of the first ones I remember is, so there's 2 hospital staff carrying me. I'm in a sheet, and they bring me out to the desert. And then they lay me down into the desert, and they just walk away and say, sorry, we can't help you. And they get progressively worse as we go. It's like, and to me, it was like temptation to give up, because I could easily just said, this is too much with all this bad news, because I really don't know what's going out on the outside where people are actually helping me. But on the inside, all I'm thinking is people don't care and people aren't willing to help me. And that's the message I'm getting in this coma. So you kind of go, no, I kind of don't believe that that's really this case, that people don't care about me and don't want to help me. And you kind of just keep fighting through these dreams, and then they get, like I said, progressively worse. So then it gets into, from someone's just leaving me. Then there's a point where I'm in a doctor's office, and I'm kind of like on a couch waiting to be the next person to be seen. And all of a sudden it's like, I think I'm next. And then they go, nope, sorry, we're not going to see you. We're calling the police instead. And you don't know what you did. A lot of the dreams came in after something horrible happened, but I never knew what happened or why I was to blame for whatever was going on. I mean, there's another one where, I'm on a bus and it's turned upside down, and you're kind of hanging upside down in your seatbelt, and all these other people are there, and they're blaming you for whatever happened. And you're just like, I'm in the back like everybody else. I'm not sure how I flipped the bus over, but, and then it gets to a point where, another dream where I'm kind of laying broken in a backyard, and the people are having a barbecue. I don't know how I ended up there. I kind of just started at that point. And then, so there's a young boy, maybe 14, 15 years old, and he's with his dad, and they're staring at me, and they're mad that I'm laying in their backyard all broken on there. And the kid just looks at his dad and goes, why don't we just let him die? And then, then I start getting angry. I was like, wait a minute. I was like, there was no reason to want me to die. I did nothing to this kid other than lay there. And then you kind of fight through that. So go, okay, that's not real either. And then, you get to a point where they're trying to actually kill you. One of the last dreams is, I'm I'm on like a tourist train, kind of like those little tourist trains in Western Colorado that goes to those little mountain towns. And they kind of they pick me up because I can't move in any of these dreams. I couldn't talk up until this point. And they kind of just load me on there and they just say, you know, and apparently I did something wrong. Again, I had no idea what horrible thing I had done to anybody, but they just say, you know, anyone while you're on this train is allowed to kill you if they want to, and there's no repercussions for them killing you. So, and it's like an open card train. So you almost think of like people shooting you from the outside, like a sniper or something like that. And so it starts going along, and at first I'm just like, somebody going to shoot me or what's going to happen? I have no defense against this. And then I kind of just like, all that worry kind of just kind of went away. And I kind of, for the first time, kind of stuck my neck up and spoke for the first time in any of these dreams. And I said, you know, I was like, if you're going to kill me, you better kill me now. Because if you're not going to kill me now, you're not going to have a chance later, because I'm coming back from all this and I'm coming back strong. And then kind of all the nightmares went away. And the next thing I remember was opening my eyes and seeing the doctor looking down at me at my bed. And he said, you know, you're lucky to be alive. And I, you know, you're kind of in a weird state when you open your eyes and it's like sunshine. Yet my eyes hadn't been open in 8 days from the coma. So my eyes are adjusting and they must have taken my contact lenses out because I can't see too well without corrective vision. I just see the guy in a white jacket. I was like, well, if he must be pretty important. He has a white jacket on. If he's telling me I'm lucky to be alive. And I was just like, thanks for helping me. And I kind of just put my hand up and gave him a little high five. And he looked at me like, what are you doing? It's like, I was like, yeah, I guess he doesn't get a lot of high fives from people that just wake up from comas. But I didn't know. I was just like, thanks. And I was so happy to be out of the coma that I was like, I'm looking for high fives for everybody. I was like, I'll hand out a high five all day, every day for this. So it was like, if he was bold enough to tell me I was lucky to be alive, I guess I was you know, bold enough to give him a high five, I guess.
Right. Yeah, some reprieve from that. Well, Sam, before we keep going into like rehab and stuff, was there any questions you had about like the accident itself, injuries, or the nightmares or anything like that?
And because I haven't had the chance to read your book yet, but I did see some other interviews that you did with some other people. Did they actually check for brain damage, or are you just like assuming they did?
Well, so when I woke up, so when I wake up, I have no idea what my injuries are because I blacked out when I hit the building. So and probably super lucky that I blacked out because I didn't have to deal with, you know, all that pain. But there's plenty of pain to come. But at that point, not a lot. So when I wake up, I'm looking out and I'm like, what the heck is wrong with me? Because I knew I could move my hand because I gave him the high five, but I see like casts on my arms. There's you know, white gauze all over my chest, and there's 10 or 12 tubes coming out draining blood, and I'm just surrounded by machines beeping. Like there's like five or six IV bags hanging up and going into me. And at that point, I couldn't even really feel my feet. So I was like, I didn't know if I was paralyzed or what. I just knew I could move my hands. So I was like, well, I guess my upper body's not paralyzed, but the rest of it. And then my chest was super tight. So when they put my heart back, they sawed my sternum in half. And so it goes pretty much below my belt to my clavicle where they cut it open. So it almost felt like it's like 10 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound sack. I was just like, I think they put this on too tight. I was just like, but I guess I was just swollen from, you know, everything that was going on. So it was really hard to breathe. So little by little, so at this point, my family's there, and little by little, they would tell me what my injuries were. And I was pretty, there were some parts of the day where I was completely with it. And then there were some parts of the day, I guess, because of medication and things like that, where I was completely out of it. And I would have to ask them the next day, and I would go, did I say that yesterday? Or did I not say that? Did that really happen? And then they would be like, yeah, that's real. Or like, no, that was, I don't know what you were doing when that came up, because that wasn't real. But so little by little, my family would tell me what my injuries were. And sometimes I'd ask it a couple times. I was like, really, my arm broken? They're like, yes. What about that leg? They're like, no, that leg's okay. This one's just broken. And eventually they came out to me and said, you know, they did a brain scan. There's nothing wrong with your brain. There's nothing wrong with your spine. So I was incredibly lucky because those are things that in many instances you cannot fix. And I was lucky that that didn't happen to me, where most of my injuries were, for the most part, fixable. So yeah, they said that. And even with at first, like I said, my body was numb. And eventually all those medications drained and I was in tremendous pain. But really, one of the first things I was scared to ask about if I couldn't move my legs or not. And my family's in the room. So I'm like, they're going through enough. I don't want to ask, like, well, am I paralyzed as well? My legs? Like, so I'm just like laying there and I'm looking down because I'm flat or pretty much flat. And I was like, I wonder if I can move my toe. And I'm just like, well, I can't feel anything down there, but let me just try to move it. And all of a sudden I look down and I see the blanket moving a little bit. And I'm like, well, that must be my toe moving, because why else would that blanket be moving? And I'm like, oh, all right, not paralyzed. And I was just like, I didn't say anything. I was just like quiet. I was like, no one needs to hear that probably right now. So yeah, that's how I figured out what my legs worked. But because yeah, you're just like, you're a wreck, and you're just like, I don't know what's wrong, and your brain's not working that well, so you're just like, from day to day they'd have to tell me again what my injuries were. I did have a concussion, so I guess that's some form of a brain injury, but it wasn't
Like severe.
yeah, I don't know what grade it was, or is equivalent to an NFL hit or something like that. I don't know, but it wasn't lasting, I suppose.
Yeah, no permanent brain damage or spinal cord damage, which definitely is important when you're going, because you talk about, obviously you set a goal once you kind of know you're not paralyzed,
Yeah.
and that helps get you through the rehab. But at the same time, you talk about kind of switching your mentality once you're in rehab, because it was hurting. Obviously, it's a lot of pain,
Mhm.
but at one point you do switch your mentality. And tell us a little bit about that and how that helped you get through it.
So first, yeah, the about a week after I wake up from the coma, I'm laying alone at night, and because it's like you're in bed all day and you only get sleep so long. So a lot of times you'll be up in the middle of the night and I can't move, I can't go anywhere, I can't do anything, and so you're just thinking. And I knew how my brain worked, as far as I needed to pick a goal to get to. It's like I just knew that's how my mentality, my brain works. It's very goal oriented. So I had done triathlons years before, and I hadn't done one in about 6 years. But what I came up with in that dark room was like, well, I thought, I'm broken in all these ways, but if I do a triathlon, it means my lower body works, my upper body works, my heart works. So it was kind of a proof that everything worked again if I could do that. Because if you just ran, your upper body doesn't necessarily lead to work or use or it doesn't work correctly. Or you could choose to swim, and then your lower body may not have to work correctly. But I figured this puts it all together. There was no hiding body parts if you're going to do triathlon. So that and when I'm laying there, I'm just like, all right, this is what I need to do. And I thought it's going to be a 2-year goal away. I don't know where I came up with that. I mean, the accident happened in June. So I was like, well, it's not going to be this summer, probably not the next summer. I was like, what about the next summer after that? So about 2 years. I didn't ask anybody. I didn't tell anybody, because I just didn't really want anybody to say, yeah, that's going to be great. I'm sure you'll do it. Or like, or just, I just want to hear it from anybody. I was just like, this is my goal. This is what I'm going to do. And I don't want to hear it from anybody. And I didn't know if it was a reality or anything at that point. It was even possible. But um, so that was the ultimate goal. And then, so I really hit a low point when I'm laying in that bed, because I always feel like mentally, if I'm, whatever problem I have, if I feel like there's a way I can work towards the solution, I feel way better about it, right? I have some sort of control to get to that end goal. And after weeks laying in that bed, it was hard to see the control that I had. And because I couldn't really move except my arm, my right arm up above my elbow, and that was broken in the wrist. But that was the only thing I could really use to, feed myself or move around. And so I'm laying there, and the therapist at this point, a lot of the pain has really taken a hold of my body. And the therapist would come in, and my left arm was that a cast from my shoulder all the way to my wrist, really badly broken elbow. My shoulder is kind of frozen. It can't move very much because of all the trauma. So they would come in and move my arm like an inch or two. And an inch or two, I'm screaming in pain because it's so bad. I'm like, I sweat through my gown. And we're talking about, you're in a hospital, so it's 70-degree temperatures. There's no way laying in bed you should be sweating through, a gown. But just that pain, I'm near a 10. I'm near passing out. The pain is so bad from moving it. So they would come in and just move it a little bit, and he'd be yelling, and then they move it down and move it again. And so they'd keep on moving it, because if they didn't move your arm enough, then your shoulder would completely become frozen. It'd be really even that much harder to rehab. So they didn't want that to happen. So they kind of move it. So it's horrible. And then you start going down. I feel terrible guilt, because my parents are there every single day. They come out from the East Coast, and I'm just like, man, I decided to jump out of the airplane all those times. Whether you want to blame it on the wind or anything else, ultimately it's my fault. I decided to jump out of the plane, and I can't imagine what it must have been like if for them to get that call, or like walk in and see me in a coma, and broken and breathing tubes down my throat. It's a horrible thing to see. I'm like, it's my fault. So I felt horrible guilt like all day, because when you're laying in bed and you have nothing to do, it's like guilt and beating yourself up. But I think that's a completely a really important part of the cycle to recover, was beating myself up and making myself feel terrible about myself. And the things that you regret when you wake up are the things you wish you had done. And working all those hours and all those things, I was just like, what do you regret? Things that are most important to you is like, I wasn't spending enough time with my friends and family. And I'm like, and I wake up from the coma, and who's there and who's been there for days upon days? My family. And they dropped everything and moved out there. And you're just like, man, I just got lost in for a while of getting sucked into not purposely, but off target, and you lose the path and the things that are most important to you. Sometimes you neglect the things that are most important to you, and I felt terrible about that. So as we're talking about weeks at this point. I'm out of the coma, and they're moved my arm, and I'm just like, oh man. I was like, they moved my arm an inch. I can't even move it myself. And I'm like, I'm on the verge of passing out. I was just like, how am I going to come back from this if I can't even have someone else move my arm an inch or two? And so I'm going downhill, and they could see that. The nurses come in, and they're like, what do you think if we send the psychiatrist in? I was like, I don't know. I'm sitting here all day. I need something to break up the day, because you only can watch so much daytime TV and so much misery from them moving my arm. So they send in the psychiatrist, and so he sits down, and he's just like, well, what's going on? And he's just like, guilt is terrible. I feel like a little bit helpless. Like I can't do anything to get better, because I only can move my hand, right? And then so he's, I guess you would call old school, I suppose. He just wanted to. He's like, what do you think about taking, and then add in 10 or 12 different drugs. I can't remember them off the top of my head. I remember one or two of them are definitely antidepressants, because I knew that from TV commercials. And I was just like, I don't know why you're asking me if you think it's a good idea to take medication. I'm not the one with the medical degree here. But I was like, well, what are they going to do for me? Tell me that. He's just like, oh, don't worry, I'll take out your highs and lows. I was like, sure. I was like, well, there weren't too many highs at that point. It was mostly lows. But I was like, what the? I was like, this is your solution. Of course I'm depressed. I just got smashed in the building. I don't know if I'm ever going to come back in my life. It's like, I wasn't clinically depressed, right? I wasn't like, I understand those are legitimate things to treat people when they're clinically depressed. I wasn't clinically depressed. I was just depressed because I couldn't move. And I was just like, nah, dude. I was like, the reason I'm and this is what's going on in my head. I didn't say this out loud. The reason I'm laying in this bed is to rebuild myself into a better version of me. And the thing is, I had to hit bottom before I was going to go up. And I knew, I need to make myself feel raw. I need to beat myself up. I need to go, you are terrible. You need to be better than you were before this accident. And so I'm like, this guy's just trying to make me have a shortcut. And I thought he was taking a shortcut in his own job too, because I'm like, he just wants to make me docile and not have to deal with the things. So I was like, but if you don't deal with it now, eventually you're going to have to deal with it, And I was like, this is the perfect time for me to deal with all the emotional stuff I'm going through, because I have nothing else to distract me other than think about the things that I'm regretting in life right now. And I was like, I don't want that taken away. And I was like, I need to go through this myself. I need to feel miserable. That's the recipe to come back. So I just looked at him and go, get out of my room and don't ever come back. And he was weak-willed apparently, because he just got right up and left. And it was 2 minutes from when he walked into the room to when he left. So he didn't last very long. I was like, this dude's weak anyway. Get out of my room. So he leaves, and I'm just getting madder and madder and madder. And it was the first time I've been mad since like I got into the accident. And I was just like fuming. And then as time goes by in that day, I'm realizing like this guy was in my life for 2 minutes. There's no way I could be that mad at this guy for 2 minutes of my life. And I was like, no, I'm really mad at me because I let myself feel helpless. And I was like, that's not me. I'm not helpless. I gotta figure something out to get forward. So always like these, we say, ideas came to me at night when I'm like sitting in the dark by myself in the lonesome when you should be most depressed, and that's when my brain would start going overtime because no one else was in there to bother you or talk to you or take your temperature or whatever the heck else they were doing all day to you, poking and prodding me. And I was just like, okay, let's figure out something to do now. I was like, I only can move my hand, but I was like, my mind finally felt like the clouded nature of all that medication finally went away. I was like, my mind feels like it finally works. And I'm like, okay. I was like, and early on, my dad was just like, he's like, coming back like this is going to be just like one of your races, training for one of your races. And it went in the back of my head, but then it like came out like weeks later of like what that actually meant or how I translated it into my mind. I was like, you go on like an Ironman triathlon, it's 14 or 15-hour race in a day. It's like on day one of training, you're nowhere close to being able to complete that race or do well at. It's just like you have to take little steps every single day. I was like, the same mentality I had for racing is the same mentality I need to put towards recovering from this. And I was like, you've been on some bad situations in the mountains before, avalanches coming down, almost freezing to death, frostbite on 10 toes. Like, it's not, it wasn't my first bad thing that ever happened in my life or tough thing that to go through. And so I'm like, you just need to use that same mentality you've built over your entire life. It was like I was in training for this to eventually use all those skills I had learned and built over my life for this comeback. So I go, okay. I was like, I've been in bad things before. You're going to deal with things you never thought you would have to deal with when you started the journey. I was like, just press forward every day, find a way to get a little bit better. Because up until when my mind was on all these medications, I was like, oh, I'm just going to like get up and jump up one day and start walking out. And I was like, yeah, that's probably not going to happen. Considering they won't let me put any weight on my body because I couldn't get out of bed. It was just lay in bed. So 10 weeks, I was just like in bed, not able to move at all. And so I said, okay, find a way each day to get better. And then it was like a weight lifted off my shoulder. Like, you're putting too much pressure on yourself to get better all at once. Just get slightly better each day. And over 30 days, that's going to make a huge difference. And then 90 and 120. And I was like, okay, this is going to take months. Okay, I could deal with that. And then I kind of took control of the pain. I hated the pain medication. I because it kind of altered your mind. And I was like, I need my mind to be clear to think about the things and rebuild myself and be better. But they will come into your room every couple hours and they're just like, you probably should be taking more pain medication because you're so broken. I was like, because they would try to encourage me before rehab, like, take some, it'll be better for rehab. And I was just like, no, just give it to me raw. You know what? If it hurts, it hurts. And so I was like, okay, I need to control that because, once in a while I would take pain medication, but I try to avoid as much as possible. But for then on, I was like, no, I don't want any of it anymore because I was like, it's not going to be around forever. And, when the rest of my body starts working again, if I can't deal with the pain now, how was I going to deal with it later when I didn't have any pain medication? So I was like, you got to figure it out without pain medication now. And the way I looked at it is like every day you get through another day of getting through pain without it, it was like you're that one day stronger. Because if you can get through today, you can get through the next day, and then the next day after that, it's like, it gets easier and easier just from a mental standpoint. So then I that night I let go of the guilt and was like, you can't keep living in this guilt. You can't change that skydiving accident. You can't change it now. It happened. But what you can change is how you live your life going forward and making sure you're taking care of the things and spending time with loved ones and in all these things. And one of I always say, my mom didn't like this when I said this to her after I got out of the hospital. I said, Mom, you know what the best part of this accident was? I was like, we spent 105 days together in a row. I was like, you know how long it would have taken us to spend 105 days together with vacations and everything else? It would take years. And she was like, yeah, that was so it took later. She didn't want to hear that point after the hospital, but I was like, but honestly, it was amazing time to spend time with my parents. I mean, I was a little bit broken now, but I wasn't always the best conversationalist when I was going through that pain, but it was in the later parts of my life that, I live across the country for them, and I wouldn't have had that chance unless this happened. So there's some silver linings. You got to look at the bright side of everything. And then that night too, I started realizing the importance of what I went through to help other people. Because at that point, I probably told the story 50 times, because there's always new people coming in your hospital room. They read your medical report and they go, holy cow, I can't believe you went through this. And they would always ask me about the accident. I would tell it. And at some point you were like, yeah, I'm kind of getting PTSD every time I tell the story. Like, I already relive it in my bed 100, how many times a day. And now you're asking me about it again. I wouldn't say that, but I would think that. But then that night, what happened was I started stopped thinking about how it made me feel to tell the story, and I started thinking about how people reacted every time I told the story, because it was like I would tell the story and then they would start telling me about some struggle they were going through in their life, because all these people in the hospital, the nurses and all those people, they see so many terrible things, and not everybody gets out of the hospital. There's a lot of people with, as my mom had told me, like there's a lot of people that have signs on their door that says, do not resuscitate. And she's like, you don't have that on your door. And they see terrible things, and I'm just like, that must be so hard to see every day. You're doing your best to help someone, and they might not survive, or might not ever see the outside of the hospital room again. And I was like, man, if I wasn't able to tell my story first, they would have poured their heart out to me and what they were going through. And I started seeing this whole accident as a gift given to me to connect to people in a way I could have never connected to before. And then I started seeing, I was like, wait a minute, there's something to this. I was just, because before you're just like, well, it's an accident. Now you're starting to see purpose. They're like, well, maybe I was supposed to go through this whole accident and come back from it, because I had to hit my bottom and go through the toughest thing in my life before I could understand someone else going through the toughest thing in their own life and relate to them. I was like, oh, okay. Well, maybe this comeback's not just about me. Maybe it's about all the people I can help if I can prove myself that I can come back from this mess in this accident. So I was just like, oh, it was like a whole new strength that I didn't have just because living for myself. It was living beyond for these other people that I could eventually help if I did something. So, and that night everything changed. And then, the therapist came in the next morning and started moving my arm, and it hurt just as much as it did before. And I yelled just as loud as the day before, but I was just like, I don't care. Just keep doing it. I don't care how hard I yell. Don't listen to it. Just push my arm as hard as you want. Just make me better. And she looked at me like that same look that the doctor was giving me, like when I woke up and gave him a high five. She's just like, who is this sicko? You're like, I just made you yell louder than I've ever made anybody yell. And I was like, thank you. And I'll see you tomorrow. And it was the people that treat you amazing, because they would come. It was more than once they would go, you had so many injuries. I didn't even know how to treat you. I had to bring out my textbook and crack it open from physical therapy school to figure out how to treat you. And the way you think about it is like, wow, this person works 12 hours and then they went home and then they cracked open that book to treat me. And you're just like, you're owed more. I owe them more than you can say in a thank you. And part of the whole journey is like, and I went back and thanked those people lots of times after, I raced and said, I couldn't have done this without you. But the other thing is, besides thank you, like thank you only goes so far. The way I look at it is, it's like the best way I could thank all those people that helped me all those hours is to go help someone else and take what I learned from them and what I learned from the accident and pass that on to someone else. And that's how I repay the person that helped me.
Yeah, and one part of the book that I enjoyed was when they would come in and you would kind of throw them off with their kind of routine by saying, "How are you doing?" And then they're like, and then kind of go. So I mean, that had to been nice for them to be like, okay, all this time I'm asking them how they're doing. Someone else actually asking how I'm doing.
Yeah, it's interesting that some of the the things you notice when you're laying in bed. So you can't really move, you can't do anything, and you start. It's almost like when you lose one. Well, I don't know how you. I can't compare it to losing one sense. I've never lost a sense before, but where they say you lose one sense and another sense becomes that much brighter, and it almost felt like I would look at someone would come in the room and within seconds I would know exactly how they're feeling that day, just by the tone of their voice, the way they're looking, and I would pick up on things, I guess, that I probably wouldn't have noticed before unless I was laying in the bed and not able to move. And one of the amazing things that happened was one of the nurses. So the fourth hospital I was in, the rehab hospital. I'm sitting there one day, and it's probably, I don't know, a week and a half or 2 weeks before I got discharged. And so the nurse comes in. It was a new guy that came in. Because you're always getting, every couple of days they go through their shifts, and I had never had this particular nurse before. And he walks in, and he said, "How are you doing?" I said, "Okay." I said, "How are you doing?" I could kind of, I guess sense there's something was off with him that day, even though I didn't know him. And he's just like, "No one ever asked me that." And then he starts telling me about, things that he's going through, and we're talking. And over the next, 4 or 5 days of him being my nurse, we kind of really struck up a lot of conversations. And and one of the things, one of the amazing pieces of advice he gave me was, he was a snowboarder, or still is a snowboarder. So he wound up breaking his back at some point, years before he was treating me. And he was telling me he was in a brace and he had to, sit up and not move in his bed or on his couch for, 4 months or something like that. And so he, over the previous days, he had learned like the things I was into and what I would do. And he just said to me, he's like, I want you, I know this thing happened to you with his accident. You're completely broken. He's like, but I want to tell you one thing. Do not stop taking chances for the rest of your life just because one thing bad happened to you. And, you get that advice and I go, okay. And sometimes it takes you a while to process because you're still that broken state. And at that point, I don't even think I could walk yet. You're just like, yeah, okay, I know. And it always stuck with me. And all the, these years later is, that you still have to, she's like, you wouldn't be you unless you're not going to be happy for the rest of your life if you don't take chances. And, I mean, last year, so every year I kind of have a holiday I call Coming Back to Life Day, where I celebrate the day I almost died. And I always try to do something that I haven't done before since the accident, or someone told me I wouldn't be able to ever do again. And so last year I chose to climb in the mountains again, which has its risks. Um, and I always remember that always came up to me every, I think about it all the time when he says that. And I always tell people because this guy was, so amazing that he gave me that piece of advice. So don't stop taking chances. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, what am I going to do this year for the anniversary? And I said, well, I haven't climbed mountains yet. I've hiked, I've went up mountains, but I'm talking about, I want to climb ice and snow, and I want to, get the ice axes out and the crampons on, and see if I could really do it again. I mean, I hadn't done it in a long time, and I hadn't done it, years before the accident. But I was like, am I still that dude? Am I still the guy that can do this stuff? Do I still have the mental wherewithal? Do I still have the mental control, or not? And I think that question has certainly driven me throughout my life. Of the question you ask yourself, and you're not sure if you can do it, is the reason I do it. And instead of having one mountain last year, I was like, okay, I'm going to do more than one. Let's see how many I can do while the conditions are right. And I started climbing again, and you get up there and you're nervous. It starts in the, like you guys know, at night. It's like, 2 o'clock in the morning, it's pitch black. It's like you get in over your head real quick if you're not confident. And I hadn't done it so long. I was like, there's no warm up for this. It's like, put on this. I remember how to put the crampons on. Here's the ice axes. It's dark up there. You only can see with your light 10 feet. Start climbing, see what happens. And and then something comes up that's maybe a little bit over your head since you haven't climbed in a long time, and you're like, can I still do this again? I don't know. There's no rope. If I fall, it's 1,500 feet to the ground, and someone's going to get a bad call and put me helicopter rescue in a closed bag this time. And you're like, can I do it? Can I not do it? And, sometimes you'll back off and say, maybe that's a little bit too much. Sometimes you go, today's the day to go for it. Let's see what I can do. So.
Right. It reminds me of that old saying that somebody asked George Mallory. They're like, "Why do you do it?" He's like, "Because it's there." It's that challenge, that excitement. Well, you sort of obviously you're getting better. You're going through rehab. You're able to get into the wheelchair and kind of move yourself around, which is a
Mhm.
struggle, you said, and
Yeah.
it's pain. It's painful. You're talking how it still hurts, but you're using that to kind of push yourself further, right? And then once you're out of that, you're able to get into crutches, and then you kind of tell your parents, okay, it's okay to go back home. I need to make myself uncomfortable so that I can push myself forward. So walk us through kind of those steps as well.
Yeah. So the first day, that so it's about 10 weeks I couldn't move anything. So then they bring me to the rehab hospital. At that point, I think it was a couple days before, they finally took the casts off my arms. So my arms and they're like just so small. And like, I mean, if you don't move for 10 weeks, like, and plus the trauma, all your muscle goes away. So they bring me to this new hospital. And so all of a sudden it's like, okay, you're not allowed to move. Now it's like, okay, we're going to move you. And I was like, okay, I was, happy to move. So the first day, they're trying to move me from the bed to the wheelchair. And they said, you know, how about you sit up and then we'll get you in a wheelchair. I'm trying to sit up like as hard as I can. I can't sit up. I can't even budge my back from the back. So it's like, trying to do a sit up. I could not do a sit up at all. And then I, try to put my arm against the the side of the bed where they have like a grip on there on the side of the hospital bed. And I couldn't, I wasn't strong enough to pull myself up. And you think about how easy that is in normal life to do that. And then they're like, okay, well, just try to roll on your side. I couldn't even roll on my side. It was so hard. I was just like, I don't have I don't have the physical strength to do it. And I'm struggling and pulling and I just couldn't do it. So basically, they had to drag me into the wheelchair, and they drag you to like there's something called a slide board, which is like 2 feet long and like a foot wide. And it's basically just a laminated board, and you put your butt on there and you slide from the bed into the wheelchair, and they make it downhill so it's a little bit easier. But I couldn't do that, so they basically dragged me there, and I'm just like, oh, this looks like a bad idea going down this. I was like, don't drop me. And so they get me in the wheelchair, and then they're just like, okay, wheel yourself to breakfast. We'll see how far you can get. And so you figure the width of the room is like, I don't know, 15 feet wide or so, and I'm on the far side. And so I'm wheeling the wheelchair for the first time. I get like maybe 10 feet. And so the one arm so my arm was like stuck in a like 120-degree angle because extra bone grew, and I couldn't bend my elbow at all. So I'm trying to push down without having a tricep, and the other arm is a little bit stronger. So I'm always going in one direction, and every turn of the wheel, I'm all the way to the left each time. So I'm trying to get. Then you're fixing it, and I'm like, after like 10 minutes, they're like, breakfast only lasts for an hour. You're not going to get any food if we let you keep on trying to push yourself. So they took over, bring me to the breakfast. So every day I just thought to myself, I was like, okay, your job is to push that wheelchair a little bit further every day, and that's going to add up. That's all you need to figure out, you know. So um, every day it was just for, and then they would give me exercises, and they would, sometimes they had multiple patients, so they would say, all right, do 3 sets of 10 reps of this leg raise or whatever the heck they would give me. So then they'd come back 10 minutes later and they'd still see me going, and they go, well, how many did you do? What's taking you so long? It was like, how many sets did you do? I was like, I did like 10 sets. Like, well, I told you to do 3 sets. Why'd you do 10? I was like, well, 10's better than 3, and I'm looking to walk again. So like, I'm going to do as many as I can. They're like, okay. They were just like, and then every time they would come into my room, they would realize I would be working out on myself. I would ask them to give me exercises because you had about 3 hours of rehab a day. So you figure 3.5 hours, there's a lot of free time where there's nothing to do. So I'm like, well, I'm just going to spend every second of every day doing rehab by myself then, because it's going to benefit getting out of here quicker or more progress. So every time they come in, they'd see me do it some, and then all of a sudden they catch on to it. They're like, okay, he seems to be working. So they'd bring on more exercise equipment in my room. They're like, oh, try this. Now try this. And try this when you're by yourself. I was like, okay. And then by the end, there was like more dumbbells and things like that in my room than there was in the rehab room. So once they saw that I was serious about doing this as hard as possible, they would find ways to give me more things to do to help out. And I would never say no to anything. Whatever they asked me, I'm just like, well, I mean, they're not trying to break me. So if they say I could do it, I should be able to do it. So I kind of had that mentality. But they never thought I would walk out of the hospital because what I realized was I was just like, well, that's weird. They're not asking me what my goal is when I get in there after like 3 days. I was like, well, maybe I should tell them what it is. I was like, so they come in the next day, the therapist, and I'm just like, I'm walking out of this hospital on that day. I'm just letting you know that's my goal. And they're like, they get the crazy look again. Like, that's not happening. They're like, you're going to go home in a wheelchair. All right. So I was like, I'll do whatever. I was thinking in my mind, I was like, I'll do whatever you want me to do. I don't care. I'll never say no. And this is going to lead me. You might not believe it. I'm going to walk out here. I believe it, and that's fine. I'll do whatever you want me to do every day. And they didn't think I was going to be able to be there long enough to be able to walk. But luckily, the insurance company, for whatever reason, kept on approving me to stay a little bit longer, and I was able to get in the opportunity to get more X-rays, because you only get X-rays every 4 weeks. And so they thought I was going to be gone before I was going to get the next set of X-rays, because the last set of X-rays was like, a couple days before I went to the rehab hospital. So the doctor checks me out and he's like, "Oh, you're not fully healed," and I'm just like, "Oh man, that means I'm probably going home in the wheelchair." But then he said, "You're healed enough. I think it'll help if you're able to put weight on your legs, because it'll help those bones heal faster." So I was just like, "Oh, like, you're all fired up at this point." And then they drive me back to the rehab hospital, and so I'm sitting down. I get back at lunch. I'm eating my lunch, and the therapist is like, do you think you want to try to walk today? I was like, let's walk right now. I was like, I've been thinking about in my mind what it was going to be like to walk for the first time for like weeks. So therapy room's all quiet because it's lunchtime, and she brings me in there, puts my wheelchair down, and she's like, all right, it's time to get up. And so I put my feet on the ground and push myself up. And you would think like, I had like hundreds of pounds on my back, like I was in the gym, like doing heavy squats. And I was like, no, there's no weight. It was just my body. And that was like, my legs are shaking uncontrollably just from trying to stand up and take a couple steps and go. So from then on, it was just like every day I was just like, okay, today I did, they let me walk 6 feet 2 times on that first day, or maybe it was 3 times. So the next day I was like, okay, I got to find a way to walk further than that. And at first they gave me a walker. So every day I'm like pushing the walker around and walk a little bit further the next day. And then, same thing the next few days. And then after, I don't know, a couple of days, the walker was kind of hard to walk with, because it's not how you naturally walk with your right arm and arm swinging with your feet. So I was like, they were like, why don't you try those crutches? So I get on the crutches, and so I kind of looked at it as like little stepping stones, right? If you get to it's like, I want to get past where I don't have to use that walker anymore. I can use crutches. Then when the crutches were like, okay, now I want to get to the point where I can only use one crutch. And after one crutch, it's like, use the cane. Then it's like, how long could I walk without anything? And then eventually that leads to running a couple months later. So yeah, it was all like little just stepping stones all the way to go, how do I get to this next thing, and how do I get to this next thing? And that's kind of how I used it to eventually run.
Yeah, no, it's very inspiring. Sam, anything that you want to ask about the rehab and that kind of process there?
Yeah. I actually have one that's kind of like it, but what was the concept of time during like the recovery phase? Like, did you was time like going fast or slow, or just kind of normal as usual?
It was a weird bit of isolation in that I mean, obviously there's a TV, and my sister bought me an iPad and loaded up with all kinds of stuff. So certainly, you could watch the news and the TV's on. So, but you felt oddly isolated from the outside world because you didn't go out to see anything else. You're just in that bed. I mean, and even when I'm in the wheelchair in the rehab facility, you just felt super like isolated, like time outside of the hospital keeps going, but you're kind of stuck in this alternate place of where things are kind of going slow. So that's kind of an odd experience. So when people would come and visit me, the thing about being in the hospital, so every few hours your nurse is coming in and asking like, how do you feel, and do you have any pain, and what's your pain level, and all these things. And you get so sick of talking about yourself and so sick of talking about your condition, because everything boils down to, and I don't mean that as the negative way for people in the hospital, because they're doing their job, but like you're just like, I'm so sick of talking about the injuries, I'm so sick of talking about how I feel. So when friends would come from and come and visit me, it was like the first thing I would tell them in the first 30 seconds was like my latest update physically. I was like, now we have that off the board. Let's have a real conversation about things we like to do. So, friends, we would talk about climbing, or friends would come in and be like, are we still allowed to talk about skydiving? I was like, yes, you're allowed to talk about skydiving. Tell me about what happened last weekend or what was going on. So I was like, there's no things you're not allowed to talk to me about. I'm like, you see that? I'm like, you see how broken I am? You see me laying in this bed? It's still me. It's still the same guy. I was like, don't worry about it. You treat me like you normally treat me. And so yeah, it was, that part of it was strange. And going out into the real world afterwards was, all of a sudden you're like, oh, I could choose whatever I want to eat. There's not just like the two things that are on the menu or today to eat, or I could go wherever I want. So it was somewhat a weird bit of deprivation. It puts you in a concentrated state. The good thing about, in your rehab hospital, it's like there's nothing here to do about rehab, but that's a good thing too, because there's nothing here to distract you away from doing the all the weights. It's like, if after 3.5 hours of being with the therapist, I'm sitting here all day. I'm just like, I want to take advantage of every minute, but there also isn't anything else to do, because you're like, what are you going to watch TV? You only can eat at the cafeteria so many hours a day that it's open. I was like, you might as well take advantage of every second. So it's a gift too that there's not a lot to do outside of out of the rehab and things like that. Also gives you a lot of time to think. All that burden of regrets and things like that when I'm laying in bed and I can't move. It gives you it takes away all the distractions in your life that are normally there, that pull you away from the most important things. That and you're laying there and you're like, I have nothing to think about other than the important things and how I want to do this when I get out of the hospital. Now, it's a separate challenge when you get out of the hospital to actually execute the things you wanted to do, because now all those things that were taken away in terms of distractions are back in your life. And are you going to be that same person, or are you going to do the same things that you said you were, or you thought you could do when you're in the hospital, when all those distractions come back in? So it's, yeah, it's an odd place to be. 3.5 months is a long time to be in the hospital for sure. Um, and when I came home for the first time, so when you come into Boulder, you come over a hill and you see the valley open up of the Flatirons. It's one of the most beautiful views in a world, and if you ask me. But so when I saw that for the first time, and I hadn't seen the mountains for pretty much 3.5 months, um, because the only time I got was out of the hospital, it was an ambulance ride to another hospital, and you could barely see out of the little box in the back, and you can't really see anything. And you kind of come over that mountain and you see the Flatirons open up and all the rock mountains and all the thing, and it's like shining this beautiful sunlight off the Flatirons, and it's like, I'm finally home. I'm finally you know been through this crazy battle, and I'm back. And there's a whole lot of work left to go, because that was the just start of another journey. It was kind of like, now it was 8 to 10 hours a day, and no one was watching me, no one was telling me what to do except the outpatient therapy. But for the most part, I was on my own, and I would make up my own routines of what I was doing. And I finally felt like I was taking back control, because I was able to do more physically. um, and it was just like, all right, now I'm home, now it's time to go to work for real, and let's see where I can get. So yeah, it is a weird world to be in 3.5 months in the hospital. It's you definitely feel isolated for sure. Even though people come and visit you, you can't go anywhere yourself. So it's it was almost a weird part that when I wasn't able to get out of the bed, there was this hospital. There wasn't really anywhere to go, but there was like I don't know, this inside part where they had like tomato plants where it was like open to the sun, and they would say, like they, kind of lift me with a crane into the wheelchair, and someone could push me, and they said, why don't you go outside? You need to get out of your room. And I was just like, nope, I'm just staying in my room. I don't want to see, because you couldn't see the mountains. If I could see the mountains, I probably would have asked them to send me outside, but you couldn't see the mountains from this location of this hospital. And I was kind of isolated myself a lot into that room. But like there was nothing else to do anyway. I mean, like, when am I going to go in the hallway? It looks like a hallway. There's nowhere to go. So yeah, it's a weird place to be. But maybe that's why I fought to get out of the hospital too. I was like, I need to get back to, see those mountains and do what I used to do.
Right. Yeah, get back to some normalcy and well, you set your goal and you do eventually get to accomplish that goal. Can you walk us through the finishing that, kind of getting back to strength, and then how it felt to actually get through the triathlon?
Yeah. So originally I said I thought it was going to take 2 years to get to the triathlon, and so I had finally they said they didn't think I was ever going to be able to run again, but at the 6 month mark I took my first strides. It was an ugly run, but it was more than a walk. So um, and then little by little I was like running a little bit more, and we're talking about hundreds of feet. We're not talking about all of a sudden I started running a mile. It was like really slow, and my body was super stiff and super tough to warm up. And so at some point, I probably ran for a month at this point. And I'm talking to my mom on the phone, and I just go, "Hey, Mom, I ran for the first time." Or no, I guess I said I ran, and she said, "You're gonna hurt yourself." And I was like, "Don't worry, Mom. I already been running for about a month, so I haven't hurt myself yet. So I should be able to keep going." And she was always so concerned I was going to get hurt again, which is understandable. But she finally let me in that day on a secret that no one told me. So a week after waking up from getting up from the coma, they took my parents aside and they said, he's not going to walk for 6 months, maybe more. And that was a prediction. And I walked in 3, and they're like, he's not going to get back to work or do anything outside the home for probably a year, maybe more. And I did it in 7 months. So I thought that whole time, like, I was terrible at rehab. Like, I just put my head down. I was like, I'm just going to go as hard as I can with the ability I had to go hard. And I was just like, man, I don't think I'm doing too well at this rehab thing. But apparently I was doing way better than I knew I was doing. Because I never would ask, like, am I doing okay? I was just like, I'm just keep going. Just put your head down and, repeat the same thing every day. And then hopefully, you put your faith in this recovery that eventually you're going to be better. There's no guarantees, but I was like, unless I put 100% into it, I don't want to regret 10 years from now that I didn't do that. I was like, every day, go after it. So I was like, oh, I guess I'm doing better than I thought I was. So then I was like, well, if you thought 2 years was what you were going to do, I was like, well, what if you're doing everything else twice as fast and doing things they said you would never do, and you're 6 months in and you're starting to run? I was like, what about trying to do that race in a year instead of waiting 2 years? So I go out on a run the next day, and I'm thinking about it more, and I'm just like, yeah, what about if I try it now? So I remember a race I'd done like 7 years in the past, and it was in June. So I look it up and I realized that the race happened one day short of the 1 year anniversary of the accident. I'm like, for some reason that like gripped me. I'm like, yes, do that. Don't wait till July or August or whatever. Do it in June. So I'm like, okay, that's my race. And so I have 3 months to go before the race. And at this point, I'm barely running. It's more like a hobble than any kind of run. I'd ridden my bike a couple times inside, but I hadn't ridden it outside yet. And I had additional surgeries on my elbow where they had to re-break my arm so it would bend again. And just the week before was the first time they said, okay, you can get it wet again with the incisions and all. So I was like, okay. I was like, do I think this is possible? I was like, I'm not 100% sure it's possible, but I was like, that feeling in my stomach of, do you think you can do this, was sucked me in, just like the skydiving and everything else sucks me in. So I was like, I don't know. Well, let's go for it. See what happens. I'm not really going to know if unless I do it. So I sign up for the race and, start training. And so the 3 months went by really fast. And it was difficult training because I'm really starting from like level zero. It's not like, it's like I'm out of shape. I can get into shape. It's like, no, your body's really screwed up. Like my balance is off. Like I can't swim straight most part. And it was so, and my elbow, I'm like, I'm not sure my elbow's going to hold up. It just got surgery. And I was just like, I don't know, just keep swimming, whatever, just ignore it. And so I wasn't 100% sure I could do it. So, the night before the race, it's like torrential rains are coming down. So it's June 22nd. Well, June 21st was the night before. And it's 46 degrees and it's super cold rain. You're like way out of the ordinary for June. I was just like, man, I thought it was supposed to be sunny tomorrow. Apparently not. So I wake up, it's still raining, coming down like torrential. And so I'm driving to the race. And I was like, well, you only have one chance to break the year mark if you're going to do this race. There's no other race that, this is the day. And no one is even getting out of their cars on race day. It's coming down so hard. People are just sitting in their cars, which you never see before days of races. And so half the field doesn't even bother showing up because the conditions are so bad. And I'm like, all right, well, time to go. And so starting gun goes off, start swimming. It's 59-degree water, so it's pretty cold. You're in a wetsuit, but it's still cold. And so I get about 100 yards offshore, and my heart is going like 200 beats a minute. It feels like it's coming out of the wetsuit, and I'm hyperventilating. And I was basically in a panic attack. And the only reason I knew kind of what that was is the first few weeks after waking up from that coma, I would wake up every night, and it would feel like my heart's exploding out of my chest. And I wouldn't hyperventilate, but it was, and you're just like freaking out. And I would never call the nurse or anything. I just was like, I guess this is just punishment for the accident. This is just what I have to deal with, And I would rub my head with my cast and go, just calm down. It'll be okay. And it would be okay eventually after freaking out for like half hour at a time. So I thought that's what it was. So, and I turned on my back and I'm just like, out of breath. And I kind of see the shore and I'm just like, oh, did I come back too early? And I'm questioning myself, and all these things start going through your mind to like to talk against what you're trying to do. And I'm just like, I was like, I came too far just to only come this far. I was like, I'm not turning around now. So I took a couple more deep breaths and I turn back over and start swimming again. And I just go, just get 100 yards. Just see what happened if you get 100 yards. So I get 100 yards and I start calming down a little bit. I'm like, okay, just get another 100 yards. So I go another 100 yards. And then all of a sudden, after a couple of more 100 yards, my heart goes down to normal. And then I'm not hyperventilating. And then I start swimming. I'm like, you're actually swimming like really well right now. I mean, based on my, what I was capable of physically at that point. I get out of the water and I look at my watch. I'm just like, wait a minute, you just swam faster than you've ever swam, not pre-accident, but post-accident. And I was like, and you just were freaking out like, however many minutes ago. Like I was like, oh, maybe I'm doing better than I thought. So you have to do the run to the bike, and I get on the bike and the rain's coming down sideways and it's like 20, 30 mile an hour winds cracking. And this is a pretty hilly course. So riding along and then about halfway through, so there's road spray everywhere coming up on your bike. And my feet are soaked and you're already wet from the swim, obviously. And I'm just like, at some point, I'm like halfway through, I was like, I can't really even feel my feet at this point. And then I was like, well, yeah, I don't know, keep pedaling. Then a couple minutes later, I was like, yeah, your hands are on the wheel, on the handlebars, but you can't feel them either. I was like, okay, that's not good. I was like, no one's going to save you from here. Just keep pedaling. So you're pedaling through, and with about a third left, my chain starts jumping off the sprockets of the cassette on the back of the bike. And it was like, the only thing I could find that wouldn't skip was like a really hard gear. So I'm barely be able to get up the hills with this big gear, and but I'm going enough to make it in. And then I get on to put my running shoes on. My hands are numb. I'm like jamming my feet in the shoes because I can't even tie the laces. I'm just like, I can't feel the bottom of my feet. So I just But as I'm sitting there, I'm just like remembering that doctor that said, you're probably never going to run again. And I was just like, well, we got 6.2 miles to prove that guy wrong. And I start running and I don't stop till I go through the finish line. So yeah, it was tough. The race and the conditions certainly were tough. And, but what first became what was a challenge for myself to make sure my body worked again became way more than that, because it really became about all the people that had helped me along the way. And because one thing I always hated about rehab was they would ask you, like, how are you doing? And there's not a concrete answer that you can give them. It's like, I don't know, it's like okay, or I feel crappy because I just got out of bed and I'm, all grumpy and my body's stiff and whatever. But to me, and the way my brain works, there was a concrete answer now of like, well, how are you doing? Like, well, I finished a triathlon in the time. I didn't ask for special exemptions. I finished in the time allotted for anybody, no matter what physical condition they're in. And when I would go back and visit all those people that helped me in the hospital, and they would ask me like, how are you doing? I'd say, well, I finished a triathlon. And then the most important thing is, and I wouldn't have done it without you, and all of your help that you gave me. So it was having the strength of more than just myself, all the people that contributed to that, and all that gave me that extra push to keep going forward when it's like, I don't, in training, I don't feel good today. I feel tired. I feel horrible. Get out and go. This isn't about you. And then that always pushed me forward to keep on going. So so in those horrible race conditions, you know, you kind of you're in you're in isolation as well. It's coming down hard. You're just looking. You can't even see through your sunglasses that well, and you're just like in that zone of like, push forward. You're here for a purpose. You're here for all the people that helped you along the way, and you have something to give back to them. And this is the first thing you can do. So that's really what got me through it.
Yeah, no, it's super inspirational. And at what point were you like, I gotta put it into a book form and help inspire other people going through their whatever uh, challenges they're dealing with?
Yeah. Well, at first, and having so much time to think in the hospital, I was just like, well, what do I do with this? Right. And how do I help someone else out when I kind of discover, like, I think this is the purpose of what it's about. And at first I was like, oh, well, I think I should talk. I'm supposed to talk in front of people, and kind of like, I wasn't really sure, because you're trying to figure out how this fits, and obviously help people that this just you see, because I'll stop people when I see them with slings on and braces on the street or on trails. I'll just say, oh, how are you doing? And talk to them about their injury and see what they want to tell me about it and how I can maybe help them through it. But I thought, I was like, well, maybe I'm supposed to talk to police. So I spoke at a church, and afterwards, a guy came up to me and he said, I really like your message. Do you have this anywhere I could give to my friend, because her friend was going through opioid addiction. And apparently, I said, I'll go and see them if you want. They're like, oh, they won't even let anyone in their house. And then the mission's always changing, because like how you think you can help other people may not be the way that in reality they need help. So I was just like, well, if maybe I had something written down, then I could have handed that guy a book and he could have given it to his friend that had that opioid addiction, and they could have read it in their time whenever they wanted. They didn't need to be anywhere, because I was like, maybe I'm hitting the people that maybe don't need it the most. Maybe I'm missing out on the entire population of people I'm really trying to help if I don't write it down. So I was just like, you know what? You sit down and write it down. And if you truly want to help other people, and you're not paying attention to the signs and the things that people are guiding you towards, that you're not doing what you should be doing. You're not fulfilling your mission in life. And that's how I wrote the book, and with the simple purpose of trying to help other people that are going through tough times. Because I would say it's like, the story is really not about skydiving, or it's not about triathlon. It's about is something unexpected happened to your life, and how do you come back from that? It could have just as easily been a car accident, cancer. It could have been, someone died in your life, and passed away, and like, how do you get back to where you want to be, and hopefully passing on some of the lessons that I learned or the things I used to get back is helpful for some other person going through that tough time. Because, there were days, I'll tell you, when I was laying that hospital bed, you're like, how am I going to come back from this? You doubt yourself. And, sharing that is like, I didn't just get up and say, oh, I'm going to do a triathlon. It's like, man, there was a lot of struggle before I ever got to that point. There was lots of days of doubt. There was lots of days of groaning and pain. There's lots of days where I'm just like, what is possible? What's not possible? And I'm sure other people have that same feeling, and they're not alone, because I went through the same thing. So hopefully sharing what I went through helps them when they're having those feelings of, how am I going to get through this? How can I do that? It's like, it's possible.
Yeah, no, it's inspiring. It's a good read. I recommend it. So if anyone's listening hasn't read it, make sure to go pick it up. Sam, do you have any questions, since we've gone a little bit of time without talking to you?
Do you have anything that like impacts you now, still, or no, at all?
You mean physically, as far as injuries, or just
Kind of in general, but like injuries, but like anything really.
yeah. Well, I mean, I guess in terms of injuries, yeah, I was super lucky. I mean, my elbow doesn't work, as well as it did. It's certainly stronger than it was, because they say the same thing, like, you're never going to recover from this, and you're like, okay, well, I'm just going to beat my head against the wall and see how much I can recover, and then I'll tell you if I recovered or not, instead of listening to you and someone making some kind of prediction. I certainly don't like, when I say race triathlon, and people are picturing like, some Hawaii Ironman world champion running through. I was like, no, that's it. Looked like, I'm glad there wasn't a video to see what I looked like when I was doing the race. And I still, even years later, I continue to rehab, and that's kind of what I'm into anyway, as far as I like to work out and run and things like that. But certainly I'm not as fast as I was. But impact, I like the scar that goes from up in my clavicle all the way to my belt line. There's no way not seeing it, right? Every day I get dressed, I see that in the mirror, and to me, it's like I never want it to go away, and I don't think it is. After 5 years, it's still there, but it always makes me think about what I went through before the accident, that I wasn't really happy, and the lessons I learned in the accident. There's a constant reminder to me to go, man, you got off track before. Here are the things, remember, you regretted when you were laying in that bed after that coma. Like, you can't ever let that happen again. You need to find a way to, there's going to be days you're off course. There are going to be days you're going to be dragged at work, where places you don't want to be, but you got to come back to where you have to be. And that's a constant physical reminder of going, now, what happened. Don't let it, don't let your rest of your life turn into that. And, also, like, you have more of a purpose. Like, you can't get sucked into work because you said you wanted to help people, and it might not be easy. You might not always be able to how to figure that out. And everyone doesn't say yes when you say, I think I can help someone, I want to speak. So like, you get rejection, and then but it also tests you of like, how bad do you really want to help someone? Because there's an idea, and then there's an execution of it. And sometimes it's not always everyone, doesn't open the door and say, yeah, I think you can, have a great message. But there are people that do. And then you have to take advantage of that. So yeah, I think that always stays with me, that scar. Um, and I love looking at it, because it's like, that's brings you back to where you need to be, and it guides me. If I ever, get off track, or anything's difficult's going on, it's like, you said, you open your mouth to yourself. You made these promises to yourself. Now you need to fulfill them. So I think that's what stays with me the most.
Yeah, no, and what peaks are behind you? Because I see some pictures behind you.
Oh, yeah. So that's Annapurna 3. So this is from Nepal. I was there in 2012. So we did the Annapurna Sanctuary Trek, which is awesome. So if you ever have the chance to go over to Nepal, do the Annapurna Sanctuary Trek. It's awesome. So that's Annapurna 3. So there's like 4 main Annapurna summits. Annapurna 1 is the one that's 10th highest in the world. 26,000 whatever feet. And that's also, it may have changed over the years, but at one point it was for every 2 people that summited, 1 person died trying to summit. It was one of the most lethal mountains in the world, especially the 8,000 meter peaks, because of 14 peaks above 8,000 meters in the world, and that's the 10th highest. The one above that is it's called Machu Picchu, or as Westerners call it, Fishtail Peak. So that's also on the trek into the Annapurna Sanctuary, one of the most amazing mountains in the world. I think it's 22,000 feet, maybe. I don't know, something like that, somewhere between 21, 22. Amazingly beautiful. I actually don't allow anyone to climb that. They call it it's a religious mountain, and they will not give a permit for anyone to try to climb it. So unless someone, I guess, climbed it illegally, I don't think anyone has ever summited. I don't know. I can't say that officially for 100% accurate, but yeah. So those are amazing peaks that I got to trek in Nepal, and that's amazing country, amazing people. And I was lucky enough for 2.5 weeks to trek, and we had all Nepalese guides with us, and it would teach us, traditions of the country, religious beliefs, things like that. So it was an amazing place. I'd love to get back there again. Yeah.
Yeah, no, Nepal and stuff. We actually had these guys try Nepalese food when we went to Seattle,
Uh,
and they just loved it. It was so good. I love that, and that's good. When you see the Flatirons today, or you're in Boulder, you're kind of near where the accident happened. Like, what kind of goes through your mind? Do you still feel lucky, or does it kind of maybe bring back some subconscious memory or anything? Or
I think I look at things a little bit differently now in terms of like just beauty. When I see, not saying I always thought the Flatirons were beautiful for sure, but I think especially every time I go back to a place that I had been to before the accident that is potential that I would never have been to again, I would say the colors are a little bit brighter. I appreciate it a little bit more. It's a little bit tougher now that I can't hike quite as fast or run quite as fast or do those things as fast. I think I appreciate it more that I'm able to get back there again, in a way that I might not have. I think before I was going through everything like 90 miles an hour and maybe not stopping enough to just simply enjoy what it was. And I do that a little bit more now. So I think but yeah, I look at the Flatirons every day and go, yeah, I still live here. I still love them. I get to work out under them. But yeah, I mean, in terms of like, skydiving, I guess, because the airport is, I don't know, say 12, 15 miles away from where I live. So I'll go out and ride my bike, and anytime I'm near there, I'll always pull down the road, and because I'll listen for the jump plane coming across. I'm like, okay, they're on jump run. Jump runs when everybody gets out, and I'll stop and I'll hang out on this with my bike and just watch all the parachutes land. I might not go like directly and see the skydivers. I'm generally not. I'm usually on the outside, and I'll watch everybody land, and I'll just keep going. And I mean, I'm incredibly lucky that I'm still here to be able to see that. I don't have any negative thoughts of skydiving where it's. I mean, I think I've brought the positive things that I've gained from skydiving. Like I said, almost killed me, but some of the skills you learn also help me survive. And you can't dismiss that. So I always, I have a positive feelings of skydiving, though, I'm not currently jumping. I mean, there are unfortunately accidents, and the thing is, the more things can happen, and obviously you sign away waivers and all these things when you go, but the more you are into skydiving and the more people sort of the more the negative side of skydiving you see in terms of accidents and injuries. Because at first, if you only have like 50 jumps, you hardly know anybody there. If you're on there on a Saturday and someone gets hurt on a Sunday, it's not like it's going to get publicized that someone got hurt on the Sunday. So you might not know that happened. Then when you start knowing all these different skydivers, and you're talking, you find out that, I'm not saying the death rate is necessarily crazy. I mean, you have 3.2 million skydives a year, something like that, and about 20 to 25 deaths, something like that per year. So I mean, the death rate's pretty low, but people do break their leg, break their ankle, things like that. So the more you're around, the more you see that unfortunate side of it, because there are amazing ups and amazing things you learn, and amazing bonds you have with people that you wouldn't have had unless you skydive with them. And there's kind of an interesting bond you have with people that you skydive together with. But yeah, there is that downside, and unfortunately, people do get hurt, and there are people that pass away every year, which is incredibly sad. And um, when I see something like that happen, it's it's something I think about a lot, and pray for that person and their family that they went through that. And I kind of reflect back on my own experience and what I put my family through. And it's a tough thing. It's an amazing thing, but then if something goes wrong, it has catastrophic consequences where someone's brother, someone's father, someone's mother, someone's sister, brother, all those friend dies, and they're left without them. And that is really the tough side of the sport. And it's incredibly sad, but what you gain from it, I'll say, and coming from someone who almost died themselves, the things I learned from skydiving were incredible, that I still keep with me today, and I wouldn't be the same person unless I had those things. So
Well, kind of one last kind of off question before we end off today, but I know Boulder's kind of gotten a lot of views in the public eye thanks to college football and kind of that electrifying atmosphere up there this past year with
uh-huh.
The Rock and everyone showing up. But for anyone that's visiting, where's somewhere you think they should check out? Where's one place you think they should visit before they leave Boulder?
um there's so many awesome things. I mean, one of my favorite hikes is called Walker Ranch. It's on the backside of the Flatirons. Um, I mean, it's an 8 mile hike, and it's certainly not an easy hike. So it depends on how much you can hike. But I love Walker Ranch. It South Boulder Creek comes down through it. Sometimes you'll see kayakers through it. I really love that trail. But yeah, there's so many trails that it's hard to go wrong. But just going under the Flatirons is really cool, when you can just go up to the Flatiron and touch it. And no, don't climb it unless you know what you're doing, because people get rescued off that thing every year, where they think they're like, oh, this thing looks easy, and then they're up 100 feet and go, oh, I can't get down, and I'm wearing sneakers. So it's yeah, there's so many amazing trails. I mean, I've been doing it for years, and I still don't get sick of the trails. It's I love it. El Dorado Canyon, just south of Boulder, especially for rock climbing, amazing. Yeah, Boulder, you have to. It has a lot of interesting things going on, and sometimes the normal newspaper reads like you're reading the Onion, with some of the things that are going on. It's odd, it's weird. I think I'm oddly used to it after 22 years. That some things what I would look at before and just shake my head. It's just like, no, this is just normally how it is. There's just some interesting people with interesting ideas, or odd ideas, or they've gotten rid of, unfortunately, some of the little odd events they used to have, that I guess are no longer acceptable for the for the town. But yeah, it's good restaurants. I like it for the trails, rock climbing, that's why I'm here. But it's an interesting place. Um, but yeah, but yeah.
Where can our viewers find you, find your book, and perhaps find you at a Barnes and Noble like I did, and be able to meet you and uh, get a purchased autographed copy themselves?
Sure. Well, you can, if you want an autographed copy and you can't find me at one of my book signings, you can go to jasondennen.com. So JASONDENNEN.com. Also Instagram, JWD Boulder, like the city, BOULDER. You'll see I'll post everywhere I'm appearing for from book signings, and you'll see me speaking various places. So if you ever have somewhere you want me to speak and tell my story, please reach out, and we can talk and see if I can get there. And but yeah, and if you're struggling for whatever you're going through in life, feel free to reach out. I'll do what I can to try to help you through that situation, because we're all going to go through rough times. But I assure you, there's sun and light on the other side. You just you have to keep pressing forward. Don't give in and don't give up. That's what I always say to everybody. People are always going to, there's lots of people that are going to tell you what you're not able to do. And I'm not talking about if it's an injury, maybe it's work or whatever part of your life. And usually it's people that aren't invested in your life that'll tell you can't do things. And if you listen to all the people that tell you that what you can't do, you probably won't accomplish what you want. But you have to push through that negativity and what people tell you can't do and keep on going. If you have a goal, go for that goal and keep pushing hard, and don't listen to all those people that have those negative things to say, or limitations that you have, and keep pushing forward.
Yeah, no, that's great advice, and something I think even if you're not dealing with an injury, you can really implement in your life. And I gotta say, life works in mysterious ways sometimes, and I'm glad when I was filming the Rocky Mountain Tower, I was like, let me stop in that Barnes and Noble, because otherwise I might not have heard about the story. And I'm so glad I did. And thank you for joining us. Like, this has been an excellent conversation. So thank you so much.
No, I appreciate it so much for having me on. And yeah, we ran into each other when I was actually cleaning up, and I had my setup there, and I went to the car once and I had to come back to get my stuff, and you happened to be there. So if I did, if it was just, if there was 1 minute one way or another, then we would have never run into each other. So yeah, it's crazy how we met just at the right time. And yeah, thank you so much for having me on, and thank you for allowing me to tell my story, and thank you for all your thoughtful questions, and I greatly appreciate it.
So, once again, Sam and I both want to say thank you to Jason for joining us on this awesome Culz interviews. And make sure to go pick up his book, 8 Days Till Sunrise. Honestly, it's a good book and it's pretty inspiring. So, I think even if you haven't gone through this life altering injury, and you're just looking to be inspired in your own daily life, I think it's worth checking out as well. But until next time, guys, for more Culz interviews, click that link to your left. For more about what we're doing here at Culz Paranormal, click that link to your right. And don't forget to hit that like and give us a subscribe. And let us know, have you read Jason's book? And what was your biggest takeaway from the interview? Tell us in the comments below.